Today, we're going to be talking about the Anti-System Submachine Gun Directive, one of the least valuable directives in the entire game to complete, and I'm going to tell you exactly why, in addition to what I recommend doing for this sorry-ass directive, if you'd like to do it. So, the Anti-System Submachine Gun Directive, just like every other submachine gun directive, will require you to earn 4 axioms for its reward. It is pretty standard in the way the submachine gun directive goes, but the problem is, a lot of the weapons in here are just not good. So not only are you compounded with a very mediocre directive, you are compounded with what I personally consider to be the second worst submachine gun in the game, just barely above the Tengu. It is that bad, and I'll get into why soon. Now, you do have not that many options here. I mean, you've got a PDW, you've got an MKV, you've got a Tengu, Punisher, and your 3 Nanosystems options. And, there's no standouts here. There's not really any good options here no matter which way you look, and it's quite unfortunate. So, between all these, what you do will actually largely be up to your personal preference, but I would highly recommend staying away from the Nanosystem specific submachine guns, that being the PMGs, with one exception, and we'll get to that. So, for each submachine gun here, they're all, unfortunately, just not that good. So, the MKV, I did the gold one, so you'll see the gold one here, but whatever. The MKV is pretty alright. I actually like the MKV, but there's no denying that it's not that good. Ultimately, if you've ever used the PDW, it is essentially the PDW with a suppressor bolted on. That's really its only large change. It also drops off an extra damage tier, so it doesn't work as well at range, but other than that, wow, it sure does feel like a PDW. That said, it does have a slightly slower reload. It's fine. It's a fine filler submachine gun, but realistically, you probably have other submachine guns that you like using more, and at the end of the day, it is an MKV. It's just kind of mediocre, because it's a PDW that has slightly more damage output for worse range, and a slower reload. It doesn't feel like anything special, and it is a safe skip. If you find other weapons you'd like to do, which will probably not happen. The Punisher, as I've covered before, I actually personally hated the Punisher. I absolutely despise this thing. However, I'm well aware that most players quite like the Punisher, and I know it's a good submachine gun, so it should be in your lineup. It's probably your best option here, amusingly enough. So you should do the Punisher. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean I'm saying avoid it. Most players like it, so I would recommend doing it. The PDW is pretty much the most standout system submachine gun in the game. At the end of the day, it's a 750 at 125, which means it has piss poor damage output, and the gimmick of being a ranged submachine gun really isn't that good. Outside of that, it's a fine submachine gun. You can build it to work like a carbine if you really, really want to, but it's just mediocre. You can't really do a whole lot to it. It's a fine filler submachine gun. You're going to start seeing a trend here. Most of the submachine guns in this directive are what would be considered filler submachine guns elsewhere. And that's one reason this directive kind of sucks. But the PDW is fine. It's a fine filler. It's not anything exceptional, but it's a fine filler if you need something for it. Tengu. Uniquely on NSO, the NSX weapons actually count for your standard weapon directives here, and this includes the Tengu. It's shit. Avoid it. I've covered this one quite a bit. It's bad. It's just unreliable. The damage output isn't even good. It sucks. It's among a sea of bad to mediocre submachine guns, the Tengu is still a must skip. It's that awful. Avoid it at all costs. PMG 100. You're going to notice a trend with the newer NS submachine guns and that I haven't used them that much. But one look at the stats tells you that the PMG 100 is not that good. 896 RPM is swapping spit with the Armistice. The problem is you're a full damage tier lower, which means it doesn't have very good output. In addition, it burns through its ammunition quite quickly at 40 rounds, and while this reload speed is fast, it just doesn't feel good to use. It just doesn't feel nice to use because, sure, it fires fast, but it kills slow. It's just mediocre. It's just forgettable. I mean, sure, it is a 5 headshot kill at 896 RPM if you can land all headshots, but I mean, it's just, why would you use this when you have pretty much every other submachine gun available that's just better? It's just mediocre. The PMG 3 XP, I slept on this on my tier list because I hadn't actually used it at the time. I just immediately wrote it off because, according to its stats, it's a 645 RPM, 150 damage submachine gun. That's a 3-round burst. So I immediately wrote it off without having using it because it's a 3-round burst gun that's firing 645 at 150. After using it myself for a bit, I've actually rapidly changed my mind on this gun. There is no way, at least in my experience, that it is actually cycling at 645. based on my experience, it feels like it's cycling closer to 700, maybe 750, and in that regard, I think it's worth doing. I genuinely don't know what the true fire rate is, but provided you're getting your shots out quickly, and you're scoring headshots, it is a relatively decent submachine gun here. Sure, it's only 143 damage, but assuming it's outputting somewhere in the realm of 750, you're still swapping spit with things like the Aerodani, and it will kill around the same speed as a Punisher, my experience. It's really hard to get the actual raw number on this gun's fire rate, because I simply don't want to just record and count it frame by frame. But it feels good. It's also got a very quick reload for its magazine pool, and it's fine. It takes some getting used to, and I did write it off, but with a little bit of experience, it is actually quite alright. And honestly, if you're looking for something a little more unique, I would do it, but it still ultimately can be viewed as a filler submachine gun. The last option, the PMG 200, which I don't even own, is a filler submachine gun as well. It's A57 at 125, which is putting you in the same damage range, slightly above a Blitz and a Sirius. However, you only get 22 rounds, which means, compared to the regular factions, you get second-gen damage output at first-gen magazine. So, sure, it kills kind of slowly. Well, it kills quickly compared to the other options, but the problem is your magazine size is so small at 22 rounds for being an A57 RPM weapon that, I mean, it's fine. It's one of the faster killing submachine guns available to this faction, but again, it's filler. It's not anything super good. And this is the problem here. All of these submachine guns are just mediocre at best. I personally did most of this directive prior to the overhaul. So I did the MKV, I did the PDW, I did the Tengu, and then post-overhaul, I did the Punisher. And they were fine. If you're just looking for your old standard NS lineup, I would swap the Tengu with, say, the 3XB or even the 200 if you want to. But other than that, honestly, just doing the MKV, the PDW, the Punisher, and then the other submachine gun of your choice is probably the safest way to go here. You could probably drop, say, the MKV or the PDW for the 200, but none of these submachine guns are particularly good. Honestly, they're just all kind of okay. The only real standout here is the Punisher, and that's available on all factions. So the guns themselves aren't that good. Then you get to the Araxium reward, the Schrodinger. Please excuse the weird build I have on it. I'm trying to find a way to make this shitty gun work. So the Schrodinger, the video I made on this thing covers it a lot better than I will here, but it is bad. I would argue it's one of the least valuable directive weapons in the entire game, because it is just bad. And all you need to do to realize why it's bad is compare it to its base weapon, the PMG 100. So the Schrodinger, basically, it fires 2 pellets, and it fires 2 pellets at 60 damage. So basically all it's doing is 8 more damage than the PMG 100, which doesn't matter as a breakpoint, might I add, at the same fire rate, so it's less consistent than the PMG 100 because you're relying on pellet spread. Your magazine size is actually smaller because it consumes 2 bullets per round, so it actually is a magazine size of 33 rounds. The velocity is slower. The only thing it has, honestly, over the PMG 100 is that it's slightly better at range. It's one less bullet to kill at range. Which doesn't matter, because are you really going to use a submachine gun at 50 meters anyway? It's bad. It's just bad. The PMG 100 is already a mediocre, at best, bad, honestly, in general, submachine gun. And then they make a directive variant of it that is less reliable, and doesn't even increase the damage output in any way, and has a smaller magazine size. The description of this weapon, it remains unclear what the original purpose of the project actually was, is bang on. There is no reason to get this thing. It is junk. Every single submachine gun available to NSO, barring the Tengu, is better than the Schrodinger. Which doesn't make it very appealing as a directive weapon. The gimmick isn't even good because it just makes the weapon worse and doesn't even make it interesting. It is genuinely awful. I honestly cannot sell this thing any shorter than I am. It is genuinely terrible. I have yet to run into a worse directive reward than this thing. And honestly, it may very well be the worst directive reward in the entire game. It is that pitiful. So, there's just no reason to do this directive. It's just, you know, if you really want to run a submachine gun on NSO, just use a Punisher. Like, Why would you ever spend 4K certs, 3K certs, or whatever, on getting the PMG Schrodinger when it's worse than the PMG 100? And none of the submachine guns here are standouts anyway. I mean, the banner's kind of okay, I guess. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's fine, but honestly, it doesn't look better than any of the other NSO banners. Which really means that the only real reason to even complete this directive is for the 140 directive score it gives you. And honestly, if you're just playing this game to unlock directive score and being a completionist that way, you don't even care about how good the reward is. It's bad. Don't do this directive. Don't waste your time. If you're looking for a submachine gun directive, do it on NC, where it's actually good with great weapons in it. If you're looking for an NSO directive, do the Galilei, do the Newton, do the Rutherford. They're all far better than this thing. Hell, even the Dirac is stupidly funny. So, it's a waste of time. I have nothing else to say on it. It's an utter waste of time. Thank you. Please, please do not complete this directive. I beg of you. And if you do, I am so sorry. I tried to warn you. And goodbye.